So, good morning. I'm David Alderson. I actually work in the pharmaceutical industry. I studied engineering, and I am involved in, I suppose, a passionate supporter of Domboshawa Theological College based in Harare in Zimbabwe. And we're going to do this, I suppose, in a couple of parts. I'm going to do a very short sort of introduction, and then I'm going to hand over to Malcolm. For me, and I think there is a certain irony, and I'm feeling very inspired, and particularly with what Israel was saying. So it sort of feels wonderful to be talking about Africa, having worked my whole life in the UK. I've visited Africa once. I've not taught or studied theology, so I feel a bit of a fraud here. So that's the sort of confession over and done with. But I think for over 40 years, I mean, I've had a heart for Africa. And I've also been, I suppose, solidly convinced that Bible training, theology, and leadership training is absolutely critically important. So maybe my perspective here is not so much from a practitioner, but more like a dreamer. I think it's important, and if I can, and so I basically say amen to everything we've heard this morning. So. Yeah, I'm just going to give a few of what's inspired me, and I suppose what really inspired me about Domboshawa, and then I'll hand over to Malcolm, I think, who's very much been in the front line, who served, taught, persevered, has the joys, the stories, the scars and experience from that, and I think can talk from a much more first-hand experience. So for me, I suppose when I heard the vision and the plan to set up Domboshawa Theological College 30 years ago, there are a number of things that really inspired me and I suppose made so much sense. And in many ways it was like an echo of what I've heard this morning. And I think Joshua chapter 1 and verse 7 really, I think to me, captures some of these themes, where Joshua is instructed, be strong and very courageous, be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. And to me, the perspective I had was, Zimbabwe's had and continues to have like major problems, economically, politically, governance. And I suppose in my simple view of things, almost the way to transformation is not like the big revolution, upheaval, but it's almost the shining out of like a strong church and Christian leaders of integrity. And it's almost like God, for me, God can bring about change in a country that's like built on the back of, it's almost individual leaders, individual relationships that transform, I think, a country. And almost the ingredients for that change and renewal are, there's a need for leaders, and it's integrity and character of those leaders that's critical. And also leaders just don't happen overnight. They're not born. They need to be trained. They need to learn. There's a process there. So it's like training leaders. I think forming Christian character is what I suppose inspired me about Domboshawa, as in without Christian character, basically the church is not healthy. And it's in some ways, I suppose formation of that Christian character is a guard against corruption and all that, I suppose, sort of, let's say, pushes the church off course. And what is it that enables the church to be salt and light and not moulded by society's norms? It is very much that formation of Christian character through theology, through training. And I suppose the training needs to be based on truth and I suppose high academic rigour, because I think without that, we're really on, everything's on a bit of shaky foundations. And I suppose rigour builds confidence. Confidence is needed if one is going to challenge the sort of status quo or lead. And I suppose sort of lastly, I suppose what again we've touched on this morning is that whole culturally relevant bit. I think that the vision behind Domboshawa and what I suppose got me really excited all those years ago was this was something that was going to be culturally relevant. It was a, biblical theological training by Zimbabweans for Zimbabweans, with all the academic rigour, but not like implanting a different culture. So I suppose for me, what I saw was almost a way for a country to be saved and transformed, from the bottom up. It's like by training and creating Christian leaders who, like Joshua, can lead the Israelites into the promised land. It's through that actually the bigger country is transformed with integrity and confidence and courage. So that's what I suppose inspired me 30 years ago, and it's what I continue to hope for when I look at Domboshawa Theological College and what they're doing in terms of training individuals, that those individuals will play a part in the renewal of a country, and it's almost like a country is transformed one life at a time. So that's my, I suppose, story, what inspires me.